And now Michael Lints will be sharing with us his insights on investing in Asia. Michael is a venture partner at Golden Gate Ventures and is based out of Singapore. Please welcome Michael Lints.
Wow, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here for a few different reasons. One of the reasons is I'm seeing a few old friends actually of the Geeks on the Plane tour we had in July in Asia. And some of you might ask, okay, so Mike, what are you doing on stage talking about Asia? I mean, you obviously weren't born in Asia, so what's your reference? What have you done in Asia? Well, I'm a venture partner at Golden Gate Ventures. We're a venture capital firm out of Singapore, and we try to invest in the most promising startups in the Southeast Asian region. Just a quick, so that not so many people, just a quick question. Which one of you has invested in Alibaba? Here we go. One guy in the entire room. And this is one of the discussions I'm having since lately, being in Asia. So Alibaba's been all over the news for, well, the last couple of months. It was the biggest IPO, I believe in our history. For some people, it was a big surprise, but for most of the people, it wasn't. And one of the things I tell people is, would you invest in a region that has over 100,000 new mobile subscribers every day? Would you invest in a region where startups have the opportunity to address more than 600 million people? Well, that's one of the reasons I'm in Asia. Let me see if this works, guys. Here we go. I always like to use this quote. It's a quote of Jim O'Neill, and he essentially says, if there's some place you have to be, well, of course, it's Lebanon, but if there's another place you have to be, it's Asia. There is phenomenal growth over the last few years, but moving forward, there's even more growth coming towards us. This is one of the numbers I like to use. You have to imagine that over 700 million new mobile users are entering the market. Just think of it. You're a startup, you're creating some mobile app or a mobile platform, a marketplace, an e-commerce company, and your audience is more than 700 million mobile users over the next 5 years. I would say that's a pretty big market. So will Southeast Asia be a new giant? Will Southeast Asia be named next to China, India, North America, Europe? Well, one of the reasons I moved to Singapore is I think it will be. So this is an interesting figure, and a good friend of mine from McKinsey is here as well, and he was so nice to share me some of his company's figures. This is one of them. So when you look at disrupting technologies for the next years, I would say till 2030, look at mobile internet, look at cloud computing, look at big data, the Internet of Things. There's enormous market potential. And they actually say that the economic value will be approximately $625 billion US. Again, it's a great breeding platform for young and enthusiastic and passionate companies trying to tap in this market. But also consumer spending. One of the things you have, or one of the issues you have as a startup is, of course, monetizing. How do I make money? How do I generate money? Do my future customers have money to buy my products? Well, look at consumer spending over the next few years. So this is the number of growing households that are able to buy stuff we buy on a daily basis. Well, at least I don't buy an iPhone on a daily basis, but normal consumer spending is growing phenomenally in this region. Well, I hope they're sharing the presentation afterwards because you can't read this slide, but what this actually is saying that if you look at Southeast Asia as one country, if you could just imagine that Southeast Asia would be one country, it is one of the fastest growing countries or region in this world. Even next to China, next to India, next to North America, which is picking up pace again. So for most of the people I talk to, and I talk about Thailand or even Indonesia or Malaysia, they say, well, of course, I've been on a holiday to Phuket or had a great time in Bali or, I went to Cebu in the Philippines. Well, Southeast Asia is much more than just a holiday destination. It's becoming a real economic power over the next few years. And it's actually happening as we speak. I'm sorry, I'm just going to throw numbers at you guys. So if you would imagine that Southeast Asia is one country, look at the GDP figures. It would be 2.4 trillion US dollars about a year ago. And in the pace it's growing, the economy would grow in a faster pace than much of the other countries we know. So we're talking about venture capital, and we're talking about tech startups, and we're talking about these young entrepreneurs trying to conquer the world. And one of the things I try to tell them, and one of the things I want to give to you as well today is, when you're building your company, when you're looking for investments, when you're even considering this whole tech venture space, I know Silicon Valley is Hollywood, and all the big companies, Uber, Facebook, Twitter, all come from Silicon Valley, and the level of innovation and entrepreneurship is really high. But what I've seen, and my friends and colleagues as well, what we have seen over the last few years in Southeast Asia is phenomenal. Again, more figures, the number of page views, the number of Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, the adoption of new apps in this region is really phenomenal. Just by show of hands, how much of you have traveled Southeast Asia over the last few years? Okay, I want to make it my goal to get all of you guys over the next year in this beautiful, beautiful region. So looking at it from an investment standpoint, is this a good market to invest in? Well, I've showed you a lot of numbers, but that's not all. I mean, a good investment market needs more. It needs an active government. It needs venture capital firms. It needs private equity firms. It needs talent. It needs good startups. It needs people to invest in. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, and this is, I would say this is recent development. The number of venture capital firms, the number of accelerators, the number of conferences like this has been growing in a rapid pace, has been growing phenomenally. Just to name a few, Cradle in Malaysia, Magic, 500 startups, a well-known brand name all over the globe is investing more and more in Southeast Asia. Ideaspace in the Philippines, East Ventures in Indonesia. All companies, initiatives, organizations that have, I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, have seen so much deal flow, have seen so much new companies start up in this region, so much more potential coming out of it. People say it will be the next Silicon Valley. I don't like to use that phrase because I think Southeast Asia has to be an ecosystem on its own, and it's impossible to copy Silicon Valley. You shouldn't even try it. But looking at the unique characters, looking at what this country or what this region can bring to startups, can bring to investors, I would say it's an entirely new dimension. And even the bigger names, for instance, Sequoia Capital, has raised a new equity fund, or new venture capital fund, which is investing in this region. So it's not only guys like us, young, enthusiastic, passionate guys, but also the top tier names are investing in this region. Also, the governments are heavily, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but also the governments are heavily investing in the region just to help the ecosystem. I think Lebanon is trying to do something similar, and we might have some giveaways for you guys over the next few hours. And what you also see is throughout the entire, I would say, the entire life cycle of a startup, startups can raise money. There's enough seed money in the region for startups to try and collect. There's enough mentors and advisors. Again, it could always be more, but it's a really good ecosystem that is building more and more rapidly. This is specifically Singapore. Singapore is well known of investing in its local ecosystem. It's well known of the sovereign wealth funds. It's well known of the different government agencies trying to help the whole ecosystem. There's always a discussion: is it too much? Should it be less? Should it be more? In any case, I don't think there's an ideal playbook. The good thing is that at least they're trying, and they're trying really hard. And all of these firms, most of them well-known names, have headquarters in Asia, either in Singapore, either in Indonesia, but they all see this market as a new market. You might have seen the interview of Mark Zuckerberg when he was at the university in China, speaking Chinese actually. It went viral all over the internet, but it shows how much importance Asia has to also these American companies. My favorite game, Flappy Bird. So I'm telling it's all wonderful, and it's all about growth, and it's all about big numbers, and it's all about those mobile users. But there are some difficulties and there are some challenges. Different cultures, different regulations, different ecosystems, different mindsets, different GDP growth. You could almost say it's almost like traveling in Europe with all these different countries and different cultures, which makes it difficult because Asia isn't one country. It is, of course, a multitude of different countries with all of their differences. And, well, you might hear the most hilarious stories tonight when we've had a few beers, but we've had some really great, I would say, examples of what happens when you're investing in this region. Even when you're doing contracting, you have to physically bring documents to another country to get things signed, for instance. It can be difficult, it can be challenging, but this is the fun part of Asia at this moment. Well, this is a well-known picture where you travel to Jakarta or Bangkok even. The motorcycles, the congestion, the heavy traffic, it's difficult to get from A to B. This also brings a lot of opportunity for bright young people, young startups that are trying to solve this problem, that are trying to do new things with logistics and transport. So where are the opportunities? The mix of culture. When you look at, I would say, the bigger companies that have arrived all over the world, you can actually going to see what's going to happen over the next 5 years in Southeast Asia. And a few things we would like to address is e-commerce sees heavy opportunity in the region at this moment. Also because of the problems with the logistics, also because of the problems with transport, but e-commerce is growing phenomenally in the region. Payments, when you look at the entire region, only approximately 20% of the population has a bank account. So how can you solve payments when not so many people have a credit card or a bank account? How are you going to make sure that you're going to do an online payment? So there's innovation on other ways of using payment methods. Marketplaces. How am I going to buy a house? How am I going to rent a house? I have second-hand stuff, I'm trying to sell it. There are so many different opportunities in the region. I could go on for hours and talk about them. But the best way to experience it is to be there, to experience the region, talk to the entrepreneurs, and see what is happening there. I would say it's a typical emerging market with the beauty of, I would say, the difference of the different Asian cultures. It might sound like a long marketing story about how I really, really like Asia. I have to be honest, I've traveled a lot. I've been in the US, I've lived in Europe for quite a while. I haven't seen the passion of entrepreneurs, the will to grow and build global companies as I've seen over the last few years in Asia. And it's really a region, even if you're building a company here in the Middle East, it's really a region you would have to look at when you're expanding your company. So one of the things I tell also the US companies that are mostly focused on North America is at least take a look at the region and what your possibilities are. Doing the same story in Europe, and I would see more and more young startups doing, I would say, global initiatives where Asia will be a very, very important part. And I think Alibaba showed us that it is possible. I want to thank you for your time. My name is Michael, and if you want to find something, Twitter is the place to be, @MichaelLints. Thank you so much.